Howdy everybody. Last year I did a video on my gaming setup giving kind of a brief overview of the equipment I use. Today we're going to make an updated 2020 version of it. A lot has changed in the time of my last video, so I'm really excited to show you what's stayed the same and what's changed in the past year or so. Anyway, without further ado, let's get right into it. Let's start off with my peripherals. For my keyboard, I have the Corsair K70 Mark II Special Edition with Cherry MX speed switches. Here's a brief overview of the RGB profiles I use on it. And here's a quick little sound demo of it. If you asked me a year ago what my thoughts were on the keyboard, I would have definitely recommended it. However, nowadays, I don't think quite so highly of it. The main thing is how the keyboard's keycaps are of poor quality and even fly off when I type. But another thing is how Corsair has a non-standard bottom row. Overall, the keyboard is kinda meh. Next is my mouse, the Logitech G903. Like the keyboard, the longer I've used the mouse, the less I've actually come to like it. I still would like to say though that it is definitely a pretty solid gaming mouse, but recently an issue has come up where if I press mouse 3 in Chrome to open another tab, it'll sometimes just randomly double click. Not sure why. Honestly, if I were to recommend a mouse, it would be the Logitech G502 Lightspeed since it's wireless and kind of fits around your hand better. The battery life of the mouse is still really good though. I would definitely recommend it if you want a wireless mouse that lasts you pretty much all day with RGB on. Following that, I still have the same mousepad as last year, the SteelSeries QCK extra large mousepad. And my opinion on it hasn't changed. It's incredibly large, which allows me to lower my DPI and forces me to actually aim in games. I've also changed my chair. I'm unsure of the model name, but if you look up ergonomic chair on Amazon, you'll find it. For the price, it's alright. It's not insanely comfortable or anything, but it definitely gets the job done. I also have 3 monitors, the Acer XFA240, which is 144Hz, the Acer SB220Q, which is 75Hz, and finally the HP 22CWA, which is 60Hz. For the XFA240, I like the fact that it's 144Hz and has G-Sync, but the bezels are a bit thick and it has a TN panel, meaning that the viewing angles on the monitor aren't necessarily great. Overall, pretty good for a first 144Hz monitor. If you haven't noticed, I replaced my standard Dell monitor from last year with the SB220Q, and I think it was a good idea to swap it out. The old Dell monitor was beginning to flicker when I played games and it also had a small crack on it, but back to the SB220Q. I really like how it's able to go up to 75Hz if you use an HDMI cable. Finally though, it does have an IPS panel which has really nice viewing angles. Definitely a good monitor for the price point. And finally, we have the 22CWA. I've had this monitor for roughly 4 years now and I think it's definitely a good choice for a secondary or even tertiary monitor. Like the SB220Q, it has an IPS panel, meaning the viewing angles are really good on the monitor. I can't think of any downsides to the monitor, honestly. Good for the price point. Last year, my cable management was mediocre at best. The cables were constantly sagging on the floor and made my setup look much less appealing. Now though, I got a 20-pack of Linus Tech Tips Velcro ties and did what I could with them. I would still like to do more, but for the time being, I think my cable management is fine. It's definitely better than it was last year though. For my audio, let's start off with the microphone. Last year I had a Blue Yeti USB mic. Nowadays I run an AT2020 XLR microphone with a Focusrite Scarlett Solo 3rd Gen audio interface. Initially I'd gone with a Behringer UM Euphoria 2, but for whatever reason I kept getting static in the background of my recordings, so it simply just didn't work for me. The microphone's great though. I think it was a good upgrade. Unfortunately, I don't really have a side-by-side test for the mics because I gave the Yeti to my brother for Christmas, so I can't really show you the difference. But from the person who actually edits all the audio, the difference is definitely noticeable for me. I'm also now using a Rode PSA-1 boom arm and a metallic pop filter. The build quality is just exponentially better than that of my old cheapo $13 InnoGear one from last year. It reaches out further and is also just quieter. As for the pop filter, However, it does a good enough job. However, I think I'd like to get a windscreen too, just to remove any chance of there being plosives. Next are my headphones, the Philips SHP 9500. I love these headphones. They're open back, incredibly comfortable, and really cost effective. Before I was using the Corsair Voids, the non-pro versions, and was generally unhappy with them because they would occasionally distort audio and were kind of just mediocre. But having used open back headphones for about a year now, it feels weird switching to closed back when I need to. The soundstage on these headphones isn't huge, but it's definitely there. The comfort is also incredible. I can go hours wearing these and not feel uncomfortable at all. Sometimes I actually forget I'm wearing them. Also, if you were wondering, instead of using an amp, I'm simply using the headphone jack on my audio interface. This is because I can control the volume without it affecting Windows volume settings. This is great for streaming since I don't have to turn things down in Windows if they're too loud and subsequently making things quieter in my stream. Anyway, let's move on. Finally, we have my speakers, the Logitech Z313 2.1 speaker system. I'm not a huge fan of these, but they do get the job done. One thing I don't like about these is how I can't prop the speakers up higher, allowing for better sound. They're kind of just on my desk, meaning that it isn't as clear of a sound as I'd like. But overall, I think I enjoy them. The subwoofer adds a nice amount of bass when listening to music, and the speakers are plenty loud. Not sure if I'd personally recommend them though. Alright, so next is my video equipment. My webcam, the C922, has stayed the same since last year. I think it definitely is a decent webcam, but I do plan on upgrading soon though. I'd like to get the AverMedia Live Streamer Cam 313, but it's a bit pricey, so I may end up going with the Logitech Brio. Anyway, my one issue with the C922 is that whenever I restart my PC, I always have to uncheck the low light compensation box since it makes my webcam laggier and, well, not look as good. Overall though, I think I'd prefer a Logitech C920 since it does what I need to at a cheaper price. Next is my secondary webcam, the Nivea 1080p webcam. I don't love this webcam, to be honest. It's not that great, but to be fair, it is only $20 on Amazon. But it does what I need it to do, be a secondary webcam. I just solely use it for my stream will begin soon screen on my streams though. Finally, for my videos, I simply use my iPhone XR to film. It goes up to 4K 60, but I generally just use the 1080p 60 setting because I don't think it's really necessary to take up unneeded space on my phone. It's pretty decent overall though, but it does kind of have some issues when I move the files from my phone over to my PC. Other than that, it's definitely a good main camera. Now, let's move on to the lighting I use. Let's start off with the lighting I use for my face. I use the Morocco LED floor lamp that can be bought on Amazon for about $50. It does a pretty good job lighting my face. However, if you do get it, I would recommend using a piece of paper or something to diffuse the light a bit, but that's pretty standard with most lighting. Overall, I like it. For my background lights, I have the same 4 RGB bulbs from last year that I bought for about $15. Also like last year, I still have the Yeelight RGB bulb. However, unlike last year, I managed to get the RGB actually working on it. The UI for the app is relatively intuitive and the bulb is about 700 lumens, so it definitely lights up a room well. I also have another RGB bulb, the Tekken Smart Light bulb. I got it as a birthday present from one of my friends and I would definitely recommend it to everyone. At only $20, it's a really good bang for buck. However, unlike Yeelight, the app isn't as good. It's more limited than Yeelights, which I'm not a huge fan of since I can't set custom light profiles like I can with Yeelight, but overall it's really good for the price. Finally, we have the Jovi? I'm not sure how to say it, RGB strips. Unfortunately, these ones aren't controlled with an app, but like my original RGB bulbs, you can use a remote control. An issue I've seen with the two controllers is that sometimes they interfere with each other, which can be annoying. Another issue I've come across is how sometimes the colors on the strips just mess up for some individual lights. In general, they're kind of meh. Don't know if I'd really recommend them. Next, we have my Himalayan salt lamp. I love this thing. It really adds some nice ambience to my room. I also just think it looks cool. After that, similar to last year, I have my small Christmas tree up and also Christmas lights as it's now the holiday season. Anyway, let's move on to the one thing people actually care about. Alright, now we're on to the PC. My specs, for the most part, have stayed the same. However, for those who didn't watch the video last year, I'll give a quick rundown of them. I had an RTX 2070, a Ryzen 7 1700X, 16GB of DDR4 RAM at 2666 MHz, a 500GB M.2 SSD for booting and OS, a 4TB hard drive for mass storage, an MSI B350 Tomahawk motherboard, and a Cooler Master Masterbox Lite 5 case. Since last year, I've upgraded the RAM to 32GB at 3200 MHz, added in another 1TB hard drive solely for games, and changed my case to the Corsair iQ220T Airflow. The RAM was definitely a nice upgrade to get. The old kit simply wasn't fast enough, and I didn't have enough memory anyway for Premiere Pro. My timeline was really laggy whenever I would edit videos, and it would take forever to do anything. Now though, I have very few problems editing in Premiere. The hard drive was also a nice addition to the PC. I just formatted the hard drive from my old PC and moved it into the new one because I wanted to have a hard drive specifically for games. I also wanted to have more room for recordings on the 4TB one. However, I would like to swap out the 1TB hard drive for a larger 2TB one since games are starting to get larger nowadays and I'd like to have a bit more headroom. Finally, my case was probably one of the most notable upgrades. My old case lacked in a lot of departments. It had an acrylic side panel, no top ventilation for fans, and it had very little room for airflow to come in at the front of the case. However, the 220T is perfect. Well, almost perfect anyway. I have 2 fans at the front for intake and 3 for exhaust. 2 are on the top and 1's on the back. My temps are really good overall on the PC. I think the hottest I've ever seen my CPU was maybe 65 Celsius, and my GPU maybe reached 72 Celsius before. But my only real blight with the case is the size of it. As you can see, my GPU barely fit in there because of my AIO. And I can't top mount the AIO either because of the clearance with the RAM. Another thing, in order for my power supply cables to fit, I had to move the hard drive cage the furthest it could go. If you do plan on building a PC in this case, I would just say that you need to make sure you measure your parts before doing it. When building in this case, it really felt like playing Tetris, honestly. I really love the case though. Some future upgrades I'd like to make are for my CPU and motherboard. I've been saving up money for a while now to get the Ryzen 7 3700X, and yes, before you say it, I know Ryzen released their new 5000 series CPUs, but in order to have one to work, I'd need to upgrade my motherboard, and at that point I'd be spending about $600. The 3700X is totally fine and would be a relatively big upgrade for me anyway. My motherboard is also a bit of a cheaper one, and I think it'd be nice to upgrade to something like an X470 in the future, but I guess we'll have to wait and find out. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. Like I said last year, I really want this to become a tradition on my channel so I can document the evolution of the change in my equipment. I wouldn't be able to get most of this without the support of all of you, so thank you so much for the support recently. The channel has just been doing so well for the past month and a half now, and it's been really cool to see. If you enjoyed this video or any videos of mine, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed. Again, thank you all for the recent support. It's meant a lot to me. Anyway, I'll see you all soon. Bye, guys.
Break it down.